For this week's assignment, we're working with multiple layers of audio in a mixing assignment, a mixing project, excuse me. So open up the Mod 1 Assignment 4, and there are two examples I'd like us to mix. You're going to be downloading the Part 1 first, and so you'll download that to your computer. And what it's doing is it's downloading a compressed GarageBand template file, which has all the audio loaded into it already. So when you open the file, it says Music 1070 Mixing Drums Part 1. Double click on that and it should open up a GarageBand session for us. And in that session are all these audio tracks that I've loaded into it. These are what we call stem files, meaning that they are raw recordings of many parts of the drum kit. And our job is to create a unified output track that is a stereo output of all these things mixed together. And as we talked about in class, because of the way we hear sounds, because of the nature of psychoacoustics, some frequency sounds are more intense and some require more boost. We also talked about the many ways in which we place microphones on certain instruments to get a blend. And typically we mix by addition. All of our layers are going to have different levels and different panning settings so that they all have a unique consideration when it comes to hearing it. So let's go ahead and start with the kick drum mix. So we have a microphone in the kick drum, we have a microphone sitting outside the kick drum, and we have a sub kick, basically, or a signal that allows us to basically create those sub audio frequencies. Notice that these are all defaulted to down at negative infinity. So we're going to bring these into the mix. So this kick mic can be coupled with this microphone, which would give it a little bit more of a sense of sound. And then the sub. So that doesn't sound too interesting until we bring the snare in. And the snare, these are going to be the core of our mix. So our kick drum is going to be dead center. Our snare will be just off to the right a little bit. So snare and bottom and top. So because the snare drum has a bottom microphone, that bottom microphone is going to pick up the metallic snares. The top is going to pick up the sound of the head being played. And it's also a good idea to kind of loop a portion of this so it'll continuously play. And you can hear how each one of these snare layers has a different timbre. The top has a brighter sound, and the bottom has a more metallic sound. And together they create Okay, let's add our hi-hats. Hi-hats sit just to the right of the snare drum. And hi-hats are a frequency that do not need a whole lot of reinforcement. In fact, if we put this all the way up to 0, we would get a lot of hi-hat. We just want that to be kind of in the mix. We don't need it to be loud. All right, later on in this song, or in this sequence, is a ride cymbal. And that'll come in about halfway through. And you turn on the solo button and bring that in. And that's on the other side. And again, that does not need a whole lot of reinforcement. Okay, now our toms are close mic'd, and you can see by the transients in each one of these tracks that the toms have a very, very little bit of play here in this example. But if we bring them in a little bit, bring tom 1 sort of at about 11 o'clock and tom 2 way over here, because that's our floor tom. Right, you can hear that tom in that little moment here and here again. Right, they don't need a lot because they're not the focus of our drum sound. So that's a pretty decent mix of our first half. The rest of this is to provide a sense of texture and ambiance. Overhead left and right gives us an image of, and I'm going to turn off all of these while keeping the settings the same. And notice that overhead left and right, in which we're going to pan overhead left and overhead right. And we're going to bring that up at about midway. You can hear that gives you a kind of an overarching sound. Now these ribbon mics are just miking the room, so they're giving us more ambiance. And you can bring those in as a blend as you see fit. And next room mic is even more distant in terms of ambiance. That just contributes to the overall picture of the sound. Finally, this valve mic is a condenser mic that has a tube in it, and so it can give you a little bit of an edge if you're looking for that. Okay, so once I get a picture together here, you'll notice that my master track is still below threshold, and all of my settings are unique for each instrument. That means I've considered their placement in the stereo field. Okay, so further, I can go down into my master track and add other things. I can open up this button here and add an effect. I can use a compressor. I can also add effects down here. If I go down here to Platinum Verb, I can now add a live club sound. Which gives it a live feel, basically. And you can even use the EQ if you'd like. Turn on the analyzer to see it respond to the spectrum. If you want to boost the bass even more, you can, just barely. I wouldn't do much more than just a little bit here and there. If you start adding tons of you can hear how that sounds terrible. So we have to just keep that at a little bit, just if you want to add a little edge to things. So once you got something that you like, you can turn off the loop function and then go up here to share. Also, double check, you make sure your metronome isn't on because you don't want that to sound in your mix. Go over here to share, export song to disk. We're going to save to my desktop. We're going to also change the title because remember that GarageBand puts these characters in here that D2L does not understand. So this is week 4, part 1, drums. This is, I'm going to put my last name on it too, and I'm going to ask it to give me an MP3. I'm going to hit export. And it'll fix all of your settings in terms of panning and volume into your output according to what you hear in the master track. So that said, if you have something muted or soloed, it's not going to show up, or it'll isolate itself in your final recording. So let's go to my desktop. There's my drums. I'm going to hit spacebar to listen to my mix and make sure it sounds okay. Nothing is sticking out. Nothing is, sort of distorting. Everything's clean, and I'm listening for stereo placement too. Okay, and when you're happy with that, you can go ahead and upload that to the Dropbox.